What if I told you that one of the world's most successful hedge fund managers has cracked the code to both life and business success, and he's willing to share every single principle that got him there? Ray Dalio didn't just stumble into building Bridgewater Associates into the largest hedge fund on the planet. He systematically developed a set of fundamental principles that guided every major decision in his extraordinary journey from a middle-class kid trading stocks from his bedroom to managing over $160 billion. This isn't just another business book filled with vague motivational platitudes. Principles represents 30 years of real-world testing, brutal failures, spectacular comebacks, and the methodical documentation of what actually works when the stakes are highest. Dalio's approach challenges everything we think we know about leadership, decision-making, and personal development. He advocates for radical transparency in relationships, systematic mistake analysis, and the controversial idea that organizations should function more like machines than families. These aren't theoretical concepts dreamed up in an ivory tower. Every principle emerged from actual crises, real market crashes, and authentic human conflicts that could have destroyed his company and reputation. What makes this book revolutionary is Dalio's willingness to expose his own vulnerabilities, share his most painful mistakes, and demonstrate how systematic thinking can transform both personal relationships and professional outcomes. Today, we're diving deep into the mind of a financial titan who believes that principles aren't just nice ideas, but the fundamental building blocks of any meaningful success. Get ready to discover why thinking like Ray Dalio might completely change how you approach every aspect of your life. Ray Dalio's principles, life and work, represents one of the most comprehensive attempts ever made to codify the systematic thinking behind extraordinary success. Written by the founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, this book emerges from decades of real-world application under the most demanding circumstances imaginable. Dalio manages over $160 billion, which means his principles have been tested against market volatility, economic crises, and the complex dynamics of leading hundreds of brilliant, strong-willed individuals. What distinguishes this work from typical business literature is its unflinching commitment to evidence-based thinking and systematic analysis. Dalio doesn't offer quick fixes or motivational slogans. Instead, he presents a methodical framework for understanding reality, making better decisions, and building organizations that can adapt and thrive regardless of external conditions. His approach combines insights from neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and decades of practical experience managing money and people at the highest levels. The book's structure reflects Dalio's systematic mindset, dividing his insights into life principles and work principles, each grounded in what he calls believability-weighted decision-making and radical transparency. These concepts emerge from actual failures and successes, including near-bankruptcy experiences that forced him to fundamentally rethink his assumptions about markets, leadership, and human nature. Dalio's willingness to share both his triumphs and devastating mistakes provides readers with an authentic roadmap for developing their own principled approach to navigating complexity and uncertainty in any field. Principles, Life and Work chronicles Ray Dalio's evolution from an ambitious young trader to the architect of one of the most successful investment organizations in history. The narrative begins with Dalio's early fascination with markets and his discovery that success requires more than intelligence or hard work. It demands systematic thinking, rigorous self-examination, and the courage to embrace failure as a learning opportunity rather than a source of shame. The book's central thesis revolves around the idea that life operates according to discoverable principles, much like the laws of physics govern the natural world. Dalio argues that by identifying these patterns and codifying them into actionable principles, individuals and organizations can make better decisions and achieve superior outcomes. His approach emphasizes radical transparency, where people share their honest thoughts and feelings, even when uncomfortable, to create more effective relationships and faster problem solving. Dalio's personal journey illustrates these concepts through vivid storytelling about market crashes, leadership crises, and the gradual development of Bridgewater's unique culture. He describes how his early overconfidence led to devastating losses that nearly destroyed his company, forcing him to develop more humble, systematic approaches to understanding markets and managing people. The book details how he transformed these painful experiences into competitive advantages by creating systems that could identify and correct mistakes before they became catastrophic. Throughout the narrative, Dalio weaves together insights from multiple disciplines, including neuroscience research about how brains process information, evolutionary principles that explain human behavior, and practical management techniques that have proven effective in high-pressure environments. The result is a comprehensive framework for for thinking more clearly and acting more effectively in any complex situation. The foundation of Dalio's philosophy rests on embracing reality and dealing with it directly, rather than allowing wishful thinking to cloud judgment. He learned this principle through devastating personal experience when his overconfidence in predicting market movements in the early 1980s nearly bankrupted Bridgewater. This crisis forced him to recognise that being wrong wasn't a character flaw, but an inevitable part of learning and growth. He developed systematic methods for testing his beliefs against objective evidence and became obsessed with understanding why his predictions failed. This experience taught him that ego and emotions often prevent people from seeing reality clearly, leading to repeated mistakes and missed opportunities. Radical transparency emerged as another cornerstone principle after Dalio recognized that most organizations suffer from poor communication and hidden conflicts that undermine performance. At Bridgewater, he implemented policies requiring people to share their honest opinions about each other's performance and decision-making, even when those opinions were critical or uncomfortable. This approach initially created significant resistance and emotional turmoil, but ultimately led to faster problem identification, better decision-making, and stronger relationships built on authentic understanding rather than superficial politeness. Dalio argues that most people avoid difficult conversations, allowing small problems to grow into major crises that could have been prevented through honest dialogue. The concept of believability-weighted decision-making represents one of Dalio's most practical innovations for improving group decision-making. Rather than treating all opinions equally or deferring to hierarchical authority, he developed systems for evaluating the credibility of different perspectives based on track records, relevant experience, and demonstrated reasoning ability. This approach prevents both groupthink and the dominance of charismatic but inexperienced voices. At Bridgewater, important decisions involve multiple people with proven expertise in relevant areas, and their input is weighted according to their demonstrated ability to make accurate judgments in similar situations. Dalio's approach to understanding human nature draws heavily from evolutionary psychology and neuroscience research. He argues that many seemingly irrational behaviours make perfect sense when viewed through the lens of evolutionary adaptation. For example, people's tendency to avoid admitting mistakes serves survival purposes in primitive environments, but often undermines learning and progress in modern contexts. By understanding these deeply ingrained patterns, leaders can design systems and cultures that work with human nature rather than against it, creating environments where people's natural tendencies contribute to, rather than detract from, organizational effectiveness. The principle of thinking in systems rather than focusing on individual events or personalities has proven crucial for both investment success and organizational management. Dalio learned to identify recurring patterns in markets, economies, and human behavior, allowing him to anticipate changes and position his investments accordingly. This systematic thinking extends to organizational design, where he focuses on creating processes and incentive structures that produce desired outcomes regardless of which specific individuals are involved. This approach reduces dependence on exceptional people and creates more reliable, sustainable performance. Pain plus reflection equals progress represents perhaps Dalio's most personal and transformative insight. He discovered that his most painful experiences, including professional failures and personal conflicts, became his greatest sources of learning and growth when he approached them with curiosity rather than defensiveness. This principle led him to actively seek out criticism and challenge comfortable assumptions, viewing disagreement and discomfort as opportunities for improvement rather than threats to avoid. He argues that most people's instinct to avoid pain prevents them from extracting the valuable lessons that could accelerate their development. The evolution of Bridgewater's unique culture demonstrates how these principles can be implemented systematically within an organization. Dalio created detailed algorithms for decision-making, extensive documentation of principles and processes, and technology systems that track and analyze human performance and behavior patterns. This approach has produced remarkable consistency in investment performance and employee development, even as the organization has grown to employ hundreds of people across multiple locations and investment strategies. Develop a systematic approach to learning from mistakes by treating each failure as valuable data rather than a source of shame or discouragement. Dalio recommends maintaining detailed records of decisions, predictions, and outcomes, then regularly analyzing patterns to identify recurring errors in thinking or behavior. This process requires emotional discipline because it involves confronting uncomfortable truths about personal limitations and blind spots. However, this systematic mistake analysis becomes a competitive advantage because most people avoid this type of honest self-examination. Create specific time periods for reflection, document what went wrong and why, and develop concrete action plans for avoiding similar mistakes in the future. Practice radical transparency in important relationships by sharing honest feedback and encouraging others to do the same. This doesn't mean being unnecessarily harsh or critical, but rather communicating important information that could help people improve their performance or relationships. Start with smaller, less emotionally charged situations to build comfort with direct communication, then gradually apply this approach to more significant conversations. Most people avoid giving honest feedback because they fear conflict or hurting feelings, but Dalio argues that this avoidance ultimately causes more harm by preventing growth and allowing problems to escalate. Implement believability-weighted decision-making by actively seeking input from people with proven track records in relevant areas, rather than relying solely on authority, popularity, or personal preference. When facing important decisions, identify individuals who have successfully navigated similar situations and weight their advice according to their demonstrated expertise. This requires humility about personal limitations and the discipline to override emotional preferences when credible evidence points in different directions. Document decision-making processes and outcomes to improve future believability assessments. Design personal and professional systems that account for human psychological tendencies rather than assuming people will always act rationally. Recognize that everyone, including yourself, has predictable biases and emotional patterns that can undermine good decision-making. Create structures and processes that provide objective feedback and accountability, reducing dependence on willpower or exceptional discipline. This might include regular check-ins with trusted advisors, automated systems for tracking progress toward goals, or predetermined criteria for making important decisions. Cultivate intellectual humility by actively seeking out perspectives that challenge your existing beliefs and assumptions. Most people naturally seek information that confirms what they already think, but this creates dangerous blind spots and prevents adaptation to changing circumstances. Deliberately expose yourself to credible sources of disagreement and approach conflicting viewpoints with curiosity rather than defensiveness. This practice becomes especially important as you gain expertise and success, which can create overconfidence and resistance to new information. Focus on principles rather than specific tactics or techniques, because principles remain applicable across different situations, while tactics may become obsolete. Invest time in understanding the underlying reasons why certain approaches work, rather than simply copying successful behaviors. This deeper understanding allows for creative adaptation when circumstances change and prevents rigid adherence to outdated methods. Regularly examine whether current practices align with fundamental principles or have become habitual without clear justification. Build meaningful relationships based on mutual understanding and shared purpose rather than superficial agreement or personal advantage. Dalio emphasizes that the strongest partnerships emerge when people can disagree productively and challenge each other's thinking while maintaining respect and trust. This requires clear communication about values, expectations, and decision-making processes. Invest time in understanding what motivates important people in your life and how they prefer to receive feedback and support. Create systematic approaches to goal setting and progress measurement that account for both quantitative and qualitative factors. Rather than relying on vague aspirations or purely numerical targets, develop comprehensive frameworks for evaluating success that include multiple dimensions of performance. This might involve regular assessment of skill development, relationship quality, contribution to others, and alignment with personal values alongside traditional metrics like income or achievement recognition. Develop personal algorithms for recurring decisions by documenting the criteria and processes that lead to good outcomes. Many people make the same types of decisions repeatedly, but approach each instance as if it's completely novel, leading to inconsistent results and wasted mental energy. Identify patterns in your decision-making and create systematic approaches that can be refined over time. This is particularly valuable for investment decisions, career choices, and relationship management where similar situations arise regularly. Embrace the concept of evolution in personal development by viewing yourself as constantly adapting and improving rather than fixed in current capabilities or limitations. This perspective encourages continuous learning and reduces the emotional resistance that often accompanies change. Focus on developing meta skills like learning how to learn, thinking about thinking, and improving improvement processes rather than only acquiring specific knowledge or abilities. This approach creates compounding benefits that accelerate growth over time. Ray Dalio's principles. Life and work offers something increasingly rare in our world, of quick fixes and superficial solutions. A systematic, evidence-based approach to achieving meaningful success in both personal and professional domains. What makes this book particularly valuable is not just the specific insights Dalio shares, but his demonstration of how systematic thinking and principled decision-making can be applied to virtually any challenge or opportunity. His willingness to expose his own failures and vulnerabilities provides authentic credibility that is often missing from success literature written by people who want to appear infallible. The book's greatest contribution may be its framework for continuous improvement and adaptation. Rather than presenting fixed formulas or rigid rules, Dalio shows how to develop personal systems for learning, decision-making, and relationship building that can evolve as circumstances change. This approach becomes increasingly important in a world where technological advancement, economic volatility, and social change make yesterday's successful strategies potentially obsolete. Perhaps most importantly, Principles demonstrates that extraordinary success doesn't require exceptional talent or luck, but rather the discipline to think clearly, learn systematically, and act consistently according to well-tested principles. Dalio's journey from near bankruptcy to managing hundreds of billions of dollars illustrates that setbacks and failures can become competitive advantages when approached with the right mindset and systematic methodology. For anyone serious about achieving their potential and creating lasting impact, this book provides both inspiration and practical tools for building a more principled, effective approach to life and work.